Hello, welcome to the Creation Gospel. This is the series, The Spirit-Filled Family. And we've slowly worked our way through Spirit-Filled Husbands, Spirit-Filled Children, Spirit-Filled Singles, and we're wrapping up the series now with the Spirit-Filled Wives. And in the last program, we talked about the characteristics of humility, gratefulness, forgiveness, and how truly the Spirit of Adonai, in its manifestation of reverence, Yirat Adonai, that's really foundational to all those things, because to reverence or to respect someone is to give them value, to elevate them in worth. It doesn't necessarily mean to worship, but means to assign value to that person. And we talked about how that was such a critical component to opening up those communication channels. And like I said, sometimes when we deliver the message, what we think we're delivering is not what he's hearing. And so in this program, we just really want to review some tips in terms of inviting your husband to listen to you, so that he can actually hear the message you deliver. We talked about just something practical. Give a time limit to yourself. If it's one of those serious talks that you know he's really not wanting to have, and he just glazes over when you say we need to talk because he's afraid he's going to have to sit there for 2 hours while you rehash the same thing 20 times, you can see where that scares him enough that he's probably already tuned out. I mean, to the point where, yeah, you'd probably want to take the remote control away or something, because he'll find a way to distract himself. But if you can just give him that time limit, say, hey, could you give me 15 minutes and say what you need to say and stop. Deliver the message and then move on. Remember, we take our successes in very small bites. And that's helping our husbands learn how to listen because of the way that he's made. Remember, he has all this creative energy. Remember all those millions and billions of possibilities, the potential for creation. And so it's a little more difficult for him to focus that energy in one place, especially on an activity that's a little uncomfortable for him. And for some of them, really serious conversations that might turn emotional. You know, if you start to tear up or whatever, for some men that's very uncomfortable. They're not as comfortable with emotion as women are. And so giving him that small bite of time and saying, this is my limit, I'll limit myself to 20 minutes. That's going to be such a relief for him, and it's going to be much easier for him to give you that full attention for 20 minutes than to just space in and out for 2 hours. And so that's finding that compromise. I need your attention right now, but I'm going to limit this natural urge to go on and on so that you will actually hear the message. Now, the paradigm for this, we can actually find in the book of Esther. Esther really needed the king's ear. And she needed the king's ear because she needed the king's ring. She needed his authority. She needed him to take an action because something horrible was about to happen. And for a lot of us, you know, if something as imminently horrible as what was about to happen to the Jewish people, if we were in on that, we would just go hysterical. You know, we might, you know, of course back then there's always the question, will he hold out the scepter? Well, we know he did. He accepted her, invited her in, and rather than just blurt out everything that was on her heart, rather than just blurt out every fear she had, that not just the Jews would be killed, but even her very own family, her own life is at stake here, because she is a Jew. Rather than just have an emotional breakdown, rather than just raging at him, who do you think you are? What were you thinking? Are you stupid? Are you trying to kill me? she didn't approach him that way. Esther was slick. She knew how to look at an overall plan and deliver it in little bites. And so, probably part of that was that she fasted and prayed beforehand. And sometimes when we have something really important to approach our husbands with, it wouldn't hurt maybe to fast and pray for a few days beforehand. It might actually prepare the way in terms of you, in terms of instilling that patience that you're going to have once you present to him the problem, and then he in turn starts processing what you may have already processed. You've processed and you're ready for action, but he has to have time to process it as well. And the prayer and the fasting will actually give you that spiritual strength to let patience have her perfect work while he processes through the information in his own way. He may not process it the same way that you do. And so she executes her plan over 2 full days. That's pretty patient. She not only sets aside time to fast and pray, she says, okay, the actual implementation of the plan, that's going to take 2 more days. And she probably didn't have the sense that there was that much time. Nevertheless, she executes the plan. And what she does is she keeps it short and fun. Right? And that's not to be condescending. But if you truly want to get someone's attention, keep it short and fun. While at the same time she aroused his curiosity. Even though she had something super serious to deliver to him, the message was totally super serious. As he's walking into it, and this is why women are accused of manipulation, you know what, if you can learn to manipulate the way that Queen Esther did, I think it's okay. I think that's heavenly. The king didn't have a problem with it. In fact, if you think of how successful she was, the king goes from one who truly has woman problems, and he banishes his queen for being rebellious against his word. You say, there's no way I'm keeping this queen because she's going to teach all the other women in the land not to be obedient to their husbands. And he does a 180 with Esther. And he ends up basically handing her the ring and saying, the kingdom is yours. In fact, that's what he says. Whatever you want, just up to half the kingdom. So he goes into that equal yoke, even though it was a formality to say whatever you want up to half my kingdom. The fact that he would say that, I trust you, you're my wife. I trust you to do me good. And so she was very effective in what she did. And she draws him in by keeping it short and fun. And this is true. I mean, if you've ever used social media, the shorter and the more fun something is, the more it'll go viral. I mean, you can write something truly profound. You can write 3 pages worth of profoundly insightful material, and it will not get nearly the attention of 1 paragraph that's short and fun, because we tend to have very short attention spans. We're not really a nation that's interested in study anymore. We like text. We like short delivery. We have trouble, hanging in there and getting past, there's actually a point of pain when you study, when you really dig in there and start to dig out the concepts. We tend not to want to go through that pain to dig out the really good stuff. So we're like, keep it short, keep it fun, make me curious. And we've been conditioned by, commercialism in this generation is king. And so in terms of competition, the advertisements we see, they're constantly tweaking them, so they're shorter, fun, and curiosity arousing. And they just, more and more curiosity, so they have to work harder and harder and harder. So we become actually almost desensitized to anything of real value. We want the short and the fun. But if we're going to draw our husband's ear, if we know that information about human nature, that we want it short and fun and make me curious, if we want a little mystery, then we do what Esther did. We execute a plan the same way that she did. I need my husband's attention. This is a matter that's really going to require his intervention in our partnership in addressing the problem. And so she invites him to a banquet. Not just a banquet, a wine banquet. That's fun, right? Not even a normal one. Hey, let's do a wine tasting. Okay, to the king, a beautiful lady inviting me to a wine party. Hey, I wonder what's on her mind. That's a party I want to go to. All right, another party. Oh, I want to tell you what's on my mind, but I want you to come back tomorrow for another little wine party. How about that? Okay, now his curiosity's really up. When you have to know that in her heart she was just wanting to bare her soul to her husband and tell him how afraid she was. But she doesn't. She keeps that self-control. And she kind of strings him out. Oh, come on, we're going to keep it short and fun. Just come to another party tomorrow and I'll tell you. I'll tell you what's on my mind. And by now he's super curious. She's got that little mystery thing going on. And I'm telling you, ladies, you're going to have much more success with your husbands starting a party than you will an argument. What man doesn't want to come party with his wife? But if he knows he's walking into an argument, what man wants to? You have to understand these things. I mean, this is probably true of any human being. If you know you're walking into something that's going to be unpleasant, why would you? But if you thought you were walking into something fun, like a party with someone you actually liked, you're going to make an effort to be there, to be present. And by then she's heightened his expectation to the point, like, what is it? What is it? I can't wait to hear what it is. From the point that he wouldn't want to hear from Vashti. And now a complete 180 in his relationship with his wife. Like, tell me, tell me, tell me. Now, if you had something really important to tell your husband, wouldn't you want him sitting there going like, tell me, tell me, tell me? Well, she was wise in how she executed the plan. She kept it short. She didn't make it unpleasant. And when she finally delivers probably the most unpleasant news he would ever want to hear, he is just right there in terms of having every sense turned on and tuned in to her needs. What she's afraid of. What are her fears? See, that's huge. When you know you've got to have that bad conversation, for the other person to be sitting there going, tell me what's on your heart. Tell me what you need. But there again, we have to sometimes speak to the little boy in the man. And when we speak to that little boy in the man, that curious little boy, when we speak to that child in the man, just see what happens. And the thing about it is, remember we're talking about what is the difference between taking and receiving. The taker is not grateful. They feel like it's owed to them. The receiver is grateful. I don't deserve this, and I'm so grateful that you did it. And that's one of the hardest things for us ladies to master, is to learn to be grateful for things that we believe we are owed. But men love to give to their wives. Remember what the king is saying to Esther, what do you want? I'll give you half the kingdom. Of course I'm going to hold out my scepter, Esther. I love you. When they sense that we have a deep need, They love to give if they know that they're going to receive the recognition and our gratefulness for it. If all they receive back is the criticism or the mockery, or it's not enough, you're cutting off the most beautiful of relationships between the man and the woman. So, although there's all kinds of demands on your time, you know, and especially if you have children, there's huge demands on your time. If you have a job and children, and you're trying to juggle all that, you're going to have a sense of, you know, just constantly being under pressure in terms of your time. And that's, you know, number one, that's the importance of taking Shabbat, because it's taking time and making it holy and learning how to cease that creative work. But regardless of all these great pressures upon your time and your space the other 6 days of the week, and maybe this is one thing you can focus on, especially on Shabbat, because you will have more time to deal with it. If you're not keeping Shabbat, if you're not making that palace and time for your family on Shabbat, then these things will definitely never happen. You'll find yourself more and more and more at the mercy of things in your life. Time will be your enemy, space will be your enemy, things will be your enemy, relationships will be your enemy. All the things that should be working for you and serving you, you will find you are serving them. But if you will keep Shabbat, if you will make that palace and time for your family, then you're going to have some time for these things that can really be that gasoline for your marriage in terms of what you give to your husband. Because see, you might say, okay, you're saying how I receive from him, or are you talking about how I give to him? Yes. Learning to be grateful for what he gives to you. But part of learning to be grateful is I'm humble enough to be sensitive to his needs and what he likes. Remember, it's not what I think he should like, it's what he does like. And especially on Shabbat, I can minister to those needs in that holy space of time. And so you in turn can give something back to him. Now with some men, they actually like the touches of affection. It may be in the more physical realm that makes an impact on them. And that doesn't cheapen anything. Not at all, because Paul says it's physical and it's spiritual. They work together. And so you can be, you know, engaged physically with your husband with touches of affection, but it's actually strengthening your bond in a spiritual realm. You may not feel that because that may not be what you need to strengthen your spiritual connection. But he's wired differently, and let him be that way. If that's his gasoline, then minister to that need. And be grateful when he gives you those same touches of affection. Whoever is the giver and the receiver, remember, it's mutual. Another thing he might like is those words of affirmation, those actual words of gratitude. You know, thank you. I appreciate that. They may not care so much about, you know, like a pat on the back or whatever, but if they get that verbal affirmation, thank you so much. That was very thoughtful of you. Man, I know you didn't want to stop by the store on your way home, but thank you for that sacrifice. Words of gratitude, if that's what he needs. Now, if he's going to look at you like you're out of your mind, if you say thank you for stopping by the store, well, that tells you that's not on his need list. Move on to the next thing. Figure out what his gasoline is. All right? What else can help? Okay, again, go back to those conversations. If he dreads conversations with no end, then reward him with focused conversations that don't involve fixing him. Right? It might be something else. He might want your help with a chore. All right? He might have a big list of things to do, and if you could just help him, he might have a big yard project. And if you can help him with that chore. We're all different, And so we all like different things. And with each of these, he might see your help with that chore as a true expression of your love. He may care less for the word of affirmation, but you're actually doing something, like with me, put your money where your mouth is. You really want to help me, then help me rake leaves today. That's an expression to him of love. The same way with helping with dishes with some women, that's an expression of love. I don't want flowers. I want the dishes in the dishwasher. Whatever means the most to that person. And it goes back like with the relationship with Esther. She broke the problem down into small steps. And if you think he doesn't help enough around the house, then again, lists are wonderful things because we can check our progress instead of just nagging, because trust me, when you nag somebody, you lose count. You may think you've only reminded him once this weekend, but he will insist that you've said it 6 times. Our perception is different. So if you don't think he's helping enough around the house, he's not getting these critical chores done, then how about make one list each month? Might put it up on their fridge, someplace it's easy for him to see. If you have a bulletin board in the hallway or whatever, just list your 10 most important needs. And if he would agree, remember, just like those teachable moments with the children, set up those fun, interesting, short parties with your husband, whatever that party might be. Remember, you do better starting a party than an argument. And see, when he's in that stage of, hey, this might be fun. Hey, this is non-threatening. Hey, I wonder what's next. This is, when that curiosity is aroused, ask him, could you agree if I put a list of 10 things each month up on the bulletin board, do you think it would be doable if you could do 2 or 3 of the most important ones? I mean, adjust your list. You're you, I'm me. But that's actually going to give you both an opportunity for more success. Because if you're piling more on him than he can keep up with or remember, it will even cause you to prioritize. Remember the cosmic list where it says, this is how we administrate our day, and we've got 2 people, and so we have to put 2 lists together. Then if he will agree, let's say, okay, this is my list of what I think really needs to be done around the house. Can I put this list up here? Would you agree to check off 2 or 3 each month? And you might modify the list next month. You're going to take some things off, but you might add some others. You might reprioritize some others and say, this is number 1 in priority. The rain coming through the roof, we got to tend to that probably before repainting the garage. But if he can see that list and see his progress, you both have a better chance of success, and he can actually be reminded of what is important to you, and you don't have to say it and become like his mom. The last thing you want to do is end up with a marriage where it feels like you're supervising a child and it feels like he's answering to his mother. You never want to get into that situation. And so it takes away those opportunities sometimes for us to become ungrateful and sarcastic. And you might find that with that list up there as that reminder, which is very impersonal and very non-accusatory. It's just words on a page. There's no judgment with that list. It's either done or it's not done. It's just like a computer. It doesn't like you or not like you. It just is. All right? And so with that list, he might actually get a little more enthusiasm because he says, you know what, I could do these 2 things at the same time. You know what, so-and-so's coming over on such and such day. That's a big job, but he could help me do it if he brought his toolkit. Let me give him a call. Right? And so sometimes just seeing a written list is going to help both of you. And so what the goal of this is we're retaining our dignity. We don't want to become, the one that's constantly nagging, complaining, griping, because we're revealing our own nakedness when we do that. But we don't want to be one that's constantly taking our husband's clothes off in public by taking away his dignity. by taking away his garments of honor. You know, that's the thing about the Proverbs woman. Her husband, it says he's known in the gates. He has honor there because she is a wife who brings him honor and renders him honor. You're not going to go to his wife for a bad report. If you want a bad report, that's not the person you're going to go to. If you go to her, she is going to be able to list to you his best qualities. She's going to be piling those clothes of honor on him. And it's obvious we're all naked. We all fall short. You know, and that's something we often forget in criticizing others. They've probably got a list even longer on us of things that bother them about us. But the way that we can kind of cut through a lot of this sense of entitlement that I deserve more, constantly check yourself for ungratefulness, because ungratefulness really doesn't reside with the spirit of the reverence of Adonai. That feeling that you deserve more than you're receiving, if you have the reverence of Adonai, the respect of Adonai, it tends to crowd that emotion out. That carnal criticism, that public criticism of your husband, that needs to go. If people come to you in public, the only thing they should hear is his affirmation. You should be like a billboard promoting the company. Only the best service, the best products, the best working environment, the best hope for the future, the greatest possibilities, they're right here in this home. You will become his promoter. You strip the sarcasm, you strip the mockery out of your interactions, which goes back to the ungratefulness. Learn, teach yourself to be grateful, and teach yourself to exit from the competition. Don't allow the shortcomings in the other become one of those back and forth things where we try to prove which one of us is actually the better spouse. It's counterproductive. It's just ripping each other's clothes off. All of those are the wrong way to express unfulfilled needs. Just learn to express what you do need. Keep it short, keep it fun if you can, and keep it simple.
Hey everybody, this is Daniel McGurr with Ancient Covenant Ministries, and I'd like to have you consider donating to HRN because everything that goes on here is based basically off of your donations. And not only does your donations help you able to watch these programs, but it also helps the message to go forth around the world and to allow other peoples to watch. So I ask you to consider donating your money to the station if you can, and if you can't, that's fine too. But please consider donating to HRN. Thank you.
Welcome back. Okay, we've talked about the Hagar techniques for being a spouse. We don't want to exercise the Hagar techniques for communicating with our husband. We want to exercise the free woman Sarah, her building blocks, because Sarah knew how to clothe the nakedness in her house. She knew how to crown her husband, that royal priest, and to make him feel that sense of value and worth. What are the building blocks from a free woman, from the realm of the spirit, the Sarah from above? Well, number one, it's a sense of gratefulness. Remember Yeshua emptying himself. We cannot be grateful if we don't empty ourselves. Learning to be grateful, that is the key. Number two, it's loving communication. And you know what? It goes back to, like, you might think, if you loved me, you would already know this. That's not true. He doesn't know what you don't tell him. Remember, his brain is wired differently, not just as a man, but as a different human being. Each human being is unique in how he or she processes information. And just because it's obvious to me doesn't mean it's obvious to the person sitting next to me. In fact, let 6 different people witness a car wreck and you'll get 6 different accounts. Kind of close, but not exactly close. And in some instances, you wonder if they even saw the same thing. It's so different. All right? It's the same thing sometimes between spouses. Their perception of the same thing is not the same. And so we have to communicate in a loving way, and with the assumption that, well, he doesn't know what I don't tell him, so I'm going to tell him. The question is, in what spirit will I deliver the message? And since the fall, since the expulsion from the garden, Adam, he's just not as intuitive at reading emotions. He's not as good at being in tune with the Spirit. So you were put into his life to help him with that, to be that Ezer Kenegdo, to be more intuitive, to read better in the realm of the Spirit. That's why you were put there. So it's wrong to assume he should know this. No, he shouldn't. What should be happening is that you should be helping him to know this, giving him that information in a way that he can grasp it. And he relies on you. What does it say in the scripture? Her desire shall be for you. In other words, that kind of instinctual or intuitive knowledge to women, it kind of escapes men. You know, we've often talked about mother's intuition. How did mom always know when I was out doing something I shouldn't be doing? Dad sure didn't get it, but mom seemed to always knew. It's just like she had another pair of eyes that followed me around. But see, women are more in tune with spiritual things sometimes, and they can read and give unspoken signals that really build relationships. And so you're going to have to use that intuition. It says for you, toward you, for your benefit. Her desire, her intuition, her instinct is going to be for your benefit. And so rather than using it as something to beat him up, you should know this. Don't assume he does. Use it for his benefit. All right? Now, sometimes they tend to reject this because they can't, I don't really know how to put this. It's not logical, maybe. It's illogical, and it's not concrete. I think that's the word I'm looking for. You're just saying, I sense that there's trouble in this person. I don't like this guy that you're hanging out with. If you're sensing things in relationships, typically, ladies, we're right on because there is that inborn intuition there. And he might dismiss it because his instinct is not the same. And that's why a lot of times husbands can get in trouble because they're like, that's hogwash. There's nothing there. And then as it turns out, you know, this friend that little Johnny has decided to pair up with is leading little Johnny down a road where maybe you have to go pick him up at the police station someday. Mothers can typically pick out those sorts of things a little bit faster. And so he has to be willing to listen to that and understand that desire, that intuition, it's for him, it's for his benefit, because he doesn't maybe have it to such a great degree. And I don't know. Men, they've got their own special problems to bear in this world. I know that we have to suffer some things in the physical world because of sin, but men are kind of doomed to work in a world that yields thistles and thorns for all their effort. Kind of balances out that pain in childbirth part. But the constructive reminder here is the attitude. If you're transmitting what you're sensing as intuition, now sometimes your intuition, I think it's just indigestion. Some people claim that any thought that runs through their brain is from the Spirit. Well, the Spirit told me, and I'm like, no, the Spirit didn't tell you. That was your breakfast. You know, you truly have to prove these things. Don't blame every thought that runs through your head on the Holy Spirit. Prove it. You know, if it's something you're not sure about, file it away and keep an eye on it. If it's truly of the Spirit, it will prove itself over time. I got a bad feeling. Well, there might be something else that's going on there. It might be triggering something in your memory bank where you've had an unpleasant experience and this person is completely unrelated to it. This person may turn out to be your best friend someday. So you have to test these things over time, but regardless, attitude, when we approach one another in humility, remember, she comes in humility and she's offered up to half the kingdom. And what she's requesting is something that he can give. What she's requesting is safety. And men typically, for their wives, they want to protect their wives. They want to make safe places for their wives. They want to rescue their wives. Men want to be the hero to their families. And when we transmit the message with that attitude of humility, they truly respond. I mean, wicked Haman didn't have a chance after that party. You know, it's how you say, this is a problem, a lot of times that makes a difference as to whether they will, you know, wholeheartedly run in there and come alongside you and help bring that situation back to a safe place, or actually become your own adversary. Sarah disagreed with Abraham concerning the disposition of Hagar and Ishmael. And you say, well, she's the one that actually wanted him to. Well, I don't know that he was dragged into the tent kicking and screaming. That part of the story, we don't really know. We don't know how much ownership he already had in terms of being attracted to Hagar. But if there was an attraction, apparently Sarah noticed it, condoned it, but it was the wrong thing to do in that situation. Right? But when she disagrees with him on what to do with Hagar and Ishmael, you know, what she realized, and what it was saying in the scriptures, ultimately she acknowledged his authority and his ultimate responsibility toward his child in the decision. What does it say? She calls him Lord. She calls him Master. So it's okay to disagree. It's just disagree respectfully. You know, the only thing to be afraid of is being disrespectful, especially in public. And that's why I think the word says even an unbelieving, sinful husband can be brought to repentance by that respect and that quiet spirit. And that's one of the most difficult things that we have to deal with, you know, as a wife or as either spouse, actually. But are you able to tell your spouse, are you able to tell your husband that something he is doing is hurting you? And when he becomes defensive about it, because sometimes that's the first reaction, is defense. Like I said, what they hear is not, this hurts me. What they hear is criticism. And if he strikes back, if that's his first instinct, if that primal nephesh, if it rises up and he becomes defensive and insulting, can you maintain that humility? Can you maintain that meek and that quiet spirit? Because don't forget something about men. They are competitive. They had to be that way because on them was put that obligation of the food and the clothing. And so in that world of work, they are made to be a little more competitive. I mean, if you look at people who are addicted to gambling, more often there's more men that are going to be addicted to gaming than women. Not that women aren't, they are. But they are more competitive. All right? If you'll turn on a sports program, count how many of the commercials are geared specifically toward men. A men's shaving club, you know, using women as an object to sell a product. Things that actually do nothing for a woman, you're not likely to see on a sports type program as an advertisement. But that competitive aspect, when you point out a fault, or when you point out an actual sin or transgression, what he may hear from his end is that you think you're superior to him, or that you are holier than him. Now, that may not have been your intent at all. You say, well, that's my job, is, when you transgress the word, or you're doing, if there's a behavior you're doing that is damaging to our family, then it's my responsibility to point this off, or I am not your Ezer Kenegdo. I'm not functioning in my role as your wife. But understand, if you do point out those faults or that sin, because he's thinking at that primal level, and he may react at that primal level, he might think that your sole motivation in pointing this out to him is competition. I'm better than you are. I'm holier than you are. I'm more righteous than you are. And so what you really have to do in transmitting the message is show him how changing his behavior will help him, not you. If that's the way he tends, if he tends to kind of strike back and make it competitive, then be clever like Esther. She set the king up. There's no doubt about it. He was set up, but in a good way. Using, the resources of the Holy Spirit, using fasting and prayer. I think what she did was exactly right. It was a great idea. I think it was inspired. I think it was a move of the Spirit in her life. It comes across as manipulation, but it's certainly holy manipulation. And so really, Esther kind of flips it, and shows him how what Haman is about to do is going to damage the king. She's the one whose life is on the line. But she's appealing to that king's sense of ownership, his sense of responsibility toward her. She's making it personal for him, not just her, not just how it's going to hurt me. But see, I'm part of you. And if we are one, if we are together, if we're a family, then something that hurts me is hurting you. He's touching something you care about deeply. And if you can, show him how changing that behavior will help him at least just as much as it helps you. And, if your motivations are good, the only reason you are telling him is because you love him and you're worried about him and you want the best in his life. Better yet, if you're good enough, make him think it was his idea. But that's the secret. And the secret is Shabbat. Yirat Adonai, the reverence of Adonai. On Shabbat, we all rest as though the work is done. It's already done. 6 days and a rest. It's done. There's no more creation to do. The only creative work that's going on is being creative in how we choose to rest. And although, at least in our lives, we are an ongoing work of creation, obviously, because we're upholding that work of creation through the Word. As we draw near to the end of the week, the lesson every week is that, I may have left work on my desk that's not finished. There might be, a portion of the yard that's not mowed. I may have wanted to add another dessert for Shabbat, but I just didn't have time to do that extra thing. I might have wanted to do one more load of laundry before Shabbat, but it's not done. And it's okay. It's okay if your husband's not perfect. Although he may not be complete in your opinion, you're going to have a spirit in you that allows him to feel genuine approval of his work, genuine gratefulness for his work. Because see, on Shabbat, we celebrate time, something we can't see. It's the first thing in the world ever assigned a condition of holiness. It's time. It's an intangible. And so, if our beginning pattern is celebrating work we can't really see, time, then with our husbands, sometimes we have to celebrate that which we cannot see. You know, if you think of Balaam prophesying over Israel, I mean, one of the most beautiful blessings in Scripture. How lovely are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. I see no fault. And I'm like, of course there's fault. I mean, that Israelite camp was full of meanness. See, he was seeing in spiritual realms. He was lifting his eyes. He was being a visionary. And as a woman, that's our gift, is to be a visionary. And so we have to see our husbands in terms of learning how to be his Shabbat, to be the rest in his life, is apply to him that visionary sense of Shabbat. We see it now, but not yet. Remember that phrase? I'm seeing perfection that's not there. You say that's impossible. No, it's not. That's what Shabbat is all about. It's seeing perfection that is not there. How can you see something that is not there? How can you understand the Spirit? Because it's not a thing. There is no thinginess to the Spirit. It's our attachment to thinginess. We want to see the evidence in black and white, in wood, and metal, and stone, and plastic. But on Shabbat, we celebrate what we can't see. We celebrate time. And so as we celebrate in our husbands maybe evidence that we don't yet see, we celebrate their progress every week. We're grateful for what they do each week. We bring their words into balance with reverence. You know, Rabbi Heschel wrote in his book on Shabbat that Shabbat is an attitude of praise, not of petition. In other words, Shabbat is an attitude of thank you, you're wonderful, not I need you to do more. In fact, the prayer, the daily prayer is changed up a bit on Shabbat. The prayer from the Siddur, you don't get those petitions. It's more a prayer of praise and thanksgiving. That's a huge lesson to us in terms of our relationship to our husbands. There's times to work, and there's times to rest in what is. You know, Rabbi Heschel said of Shabbat, there is a realm of time where the goal is not to have, but to be. Not to own, but to give. Not to control, but to share. Not to subdue, but to be in accord. So make it your goal there. The only way you're going to achieve those goals of Shabbat is to be able to express gratefulness to one another. And so my encouragement to you would be at least once on Shabbat, if not way more than once. But make that a special time where you can express your gratefulness to your husband. You know, it's traditional within Judaism, you experience oneg on Shabbat. That means pleasure. And so you have 3 meals. You have 3 wonderful meals on Shabbat. You have the Kiddush wine. You go to the synagogue and you make prayers with the congregation. You visit with other people. You sing songs of joy. You take a nice long nap in the afternoon. But there are other types of pleasure that are reserved for Shabbat as well. That as long as that pleasure is within the boundaries of the Torah, then that is permitted to us on Shabbat. And so it becomes, within Judaism, a very special time for a husband and wife on Friday evenings to celebrate Shabbat. And you know, even in that which Paul says it's a mutual obligation toward one another, but what if on Shabbat we can truly see it as a mutual gift to one another on Shabbat, and we can actually be mutually grateful to one another on Shabbat. We say thank you for so many things. Thank you for the beautiful meal. Thank you for the beautiful blessings. Thank you for helping out with the children. Thank you for so many things. Really, there's nothing within the Shabbat that we shouldn't be grateful for, if it's part of that celebration, because learning to rest on Shabbat for us, at the same time, we can learn to rest in our husbands. And that foundational picture of reverence, as it is paired with Shabbat, see that seventh spirit, Yirat Adonai, why do we pair it up with Shabbat? Why is that such a holy thing? Well, it's the seventh in number corresponding to the Shabbat. But also in Leviticus 19:30, it says, "You shall keep my Sabbaths and revere, reverence, respect my sanctuary. I am the Lord." It also says in Exodus 16:26, "You shall gather it, the manna, for 6 days, but on the seventh day, the Sabbath, there shall be none." See, God has given you the Sabbath. Therefore, He gives you 2 days' food every 6th day. Let no man go out on the 7th day. So there's a couple of important principles there. There's a hint toward those two becoming one on the 6th day. Remember, on the 6th day of creation, the man was created. And then he was 2. But then he was 1. And that's symbolic of the 6th feast, Yom Kippur. It's a day of sacrificial love and sacrificial atonements, coverings, clothes of willing obedience. And it signifies a coming period of intimacy between heaven and earth. And that's why Adonai tells the Israelites, "I will give you 2 days' ration of the heavenly bread on the 6th day so that you can rest with me on Shabbat." So every Shabbat, Israel remembers and celebrates this miracle in the wilderness. But it also reminds them each time of the miracle of creation. And so for the entire 40-year journey in the Promised Land, Israelites are living in the realm of the supernatural. They get the dew of heaven. They get the manna. They get that intimacy with Adonai through the Mishkan. But that supernatural work, it could be reduced to earthly worms if the Israelites disobeyed the commandments concerning the collection of manna. And worms represent the death of the flesh. And so the work of the Spirit is to provide food for both the flesh and the Spirit. But it requires obedience. So if Adonai is Lord, then He is obeyed as the Lord of Shabbat. Both He and His word are reverenced. The highest act of respect or reverence is willing cooperation and willing appreciation for that provision. And so wives, we have a really unique role in picturing this willing cooperation and having respect for our husbands. And in their obedience to His righteous commandments, wives can lift the family to the supernatural in that weekly journey from the first day to Shabbat, simply by demonstrating reverence, respect for their husbands, laying the foundation for that beautiful Shabbat of rest. Why does that covering involve the realm of the supernatural? Well, Paul teaches that women have a unique ability to draw down that realm of the supernatural by allowing themselves to be covered in obedience to their husbands. And so that pretty well wraps up, at least for this program, what we want to say about, wives being part of that Shabbat rest for their husbands, being that Shabbat queen for their husbands, making him feel like a king. In the next program, we're going to look at a study text in 1 Corinthians 11 to try to get a little bit more of the insight. But wives, the challenge for us, is see him as he will be now. Just like Balaam, he saw Israel as they would be, but now. And when we can see that end from the beginning, then we can rest and leave the work to the Spirit, which is what we should do.